John 9, 1 through 7. Walking down the street, Jesus saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, causing him to be born blind?" Jesus said, "You're asking the wrong question. You're looking for someone to blame. There is no such cause-effect here. Look instead for what God can do. We need to be energetically at work for the one who sent me here, working while the sun shines. When night falls, the workday is over. For as long as I am in the world, there is plenty of light because I am the world's light." He said this, then spit in the dust, made a clay paste with his saliva, and rubbed the paste on the blind man's eyes, and said, "Go, wash at the pool of Siloam." The man went and washed and saw. Good, healthy religion is about seeing the world through the lens of wholeness and through a spirit of open-mindedness and humility. Seeing the world around us as God sees the world. And how God sees us. That is a challenge. I heard this writer, Mary Beth Ingram, who once said this. She said, "Once we recognize the value of nature, of others, and of ourselves, we are called to Imago Christi as images of Christ who embody divine love." Okay, so we are called to Imago Christi. I love that. I want a shirt that says that across it, Images of Christ walking throughout our neighborhoods, in our homes, in the schools. Can you imagine? Yes, it happens all the time, but can we do that? Can we actually make that decision to have open eyes to see how God sees? If this life is not about us, if this life is about God and others, we must come to know love, because God, as we know, is love. Good, healthy religion is about seeing the world for what it truly is, the good, the bad, and the in-between. Richard Rohr, a Franciscan priest who I've quoted many times, and Chrissy has too, says this, and I love it. It says, "Most people do not see things as they are because they see things as they are." Say that again. Most people don't see things as they are because they see things as they are. Lots of times we don't see things as they actually are. We see them through the lenses and the filters that we have. And that's normal. That's natural. We had an employee or a colleague back in Washington, D.C., who was the administrator, and she would work, and every day she came and walked to the church. And I remember she would walk back home. And I never really got to know what was going on behind that, but I always wondered, what happened in her life to where she couldn't afford a vehicle, to where she seemed to live on very meager means. And I didn't really know why, but I just assumed something had happened in her life beyond her decision to put her in a place where she just could not afford it. And we were with her for 2-3 years. Her name was Juanita, and she's a beautiful woman, and she ended up getting cancer, and it was within, 3 years of knowing her that she passed away pretty young. And it was devastating, but we were at her funeral, and her son came up to speak. And while he spoke, he shared that she had actually lived a very successful life with a very successful career. And by the time we had met her, she had gone on missions, and she had given away all her wealth. Talk about not seeing things as they really are, but through my own filters. Can you imagine? Can you imagine my surprise when I realized, oh my goodness, Juanita decided of her own choosing to give away everything she had. And what an impact that made on us. and everyone around us, because good, healthy religion is about seeing. And I love what Chrissy shared earlier about the license plate. It's such a perfect example of how we see things not usually as they truly are. And we have to have the openness and humility to say, you know what? I might not know everything there is to know about you. Have the openness and humility to say, but you are made in the image of Christ. Imago Christi. The man born blind is an example of all of us, from the beginning of life. And at many different stages in our life, we are the man born blind. We are those who don't always see clearly. And the Apostle Paul says, we see through the glass darkly or dimly. And at times, we don't see it all. As we take a look back at this thematic story of the Pharisees and Jesus, and at the end of John 9, the Pharisees are essentially, trying to figure out what Jesus is all about. How in the world did he heal this blind man? This has never happened before. They thought, well, he must just be of Satan, not possibly of God. And they find out that they are the blind ones. The Pharisees themselves are the blind ones. So in the story of the Pharisees and Jesus and the blind men, we come to the awareness that the truly blind ones are the Pharisees. This is something we talked about in our Wednesday sermon notes session. And they said, Lord, who sinned to cause this? And Jesus replies, you're asking the wrong question. You're not seeing this clearly. Your own violence and hate, your own faulty worldview is clouding your vision. There is no one to blame. And a side note, Jesus heals the blind man without the blind man ever asking. That's pretty amazing. The blind man never asked to be healed. Jesus just saw him and did it. I love that, because have you ever been blindsided by a healing you weren't expecting? You've been hurting for years from maybe a past relationship, and then boom, the pain of it all begins to subside. You've been betrayed or lied to or beaten down or controlled, and then the hate for that person fades away. Maybe it hasn't for you. But I can tell you that for me, Jesus is the only way that has happened in my life, because I can't explain it. I didn't follow a perfect, rigorous routine in my life when I've had past hurts and I've felt like I don't want to have anything to do with you. And then eventually there's this reckoning moment where someone speaks to me and God speaks through them, not of my control. And I love that, the sudden healing that sometimes comes, but it's not always that easy. And we must know love in order to give love. And that's hard work sometimes. We can't give away what we don't have. It might be possible to find ourselves in the blind man in need. It might be. I know we all need. I know we are all desperate at times. But sometimes we have to realize that we're actually the Pharisees. We're actually the Pharisees sometimes. Maybe you have an unloving childhood, and it's been hard to get over, which can make it difficult to know the love of God in adulthood. Maybe you have an experience in your marriage that fell apart, and you have a difficult time loving again. These things happen. Our whole life is a series of events. It's kind of like a tugboat to pull ourselves out of ourselves. All of the events of our lives, the relationships we've had, it's like a tugboat pulling us out of ourselves, which clouds our vision. And this is our way to connect with a God who actually loves, but sometimes it might be more difficult to realize that we have a Pharisee in each one of us. In order to see clearly, I kind of realized, and I think we all know it, there's one thing we have to give up, and that's control. And that's hard. I've had to talk about that before when I didn't know whether or not Chrissy and I were going to be at Pilgrim anymore. When I didn't know whether or not financially we were going to be able to be here. This was only 7 months ago. It seems like 3 years ago. And I had to give up control, and that was so hard for me to do, and I fought it. And then come to realize the best thing I could have done was just simply say, if this is your will, we'll be right here. If this is your will to leave and to have a new season and a new chapter, we'll be there. It's not up to us. But giving up control is just so hard, and the Pharisees wanted to control the narrative and play the blame game with the blind man. The man is blind because God is punishing him for a sinful life. Yet by default, we all do this at times. The story of the license plate. Sometimes we come up with assumptions about people based on our own filters, and they aren't always true. Sometimes they're rarely true. She's single and struggling financially because of her past choices. That was me. He's living paycheck to paycheck because he's lazy. She's walking to work because she hasn't been successful in life. They cut in front of me in traffic because they're selfish. It's a way of seeing life. That simply doesn't serve a purpose anymore. Not if we are Imago Christi. It doesn't serve a purpose. It's like poison in our veins that chokes out our ability to love. But good, healthy religion is about seeing. And that is not the way Jesus sees things. There are always a multitude of reasons why people are where they are in life. And no matter the reason, we are called to act Imago Christi as images of Christ, and in the love of Christ, the world's light. Things will definitely be illuminated so we can see more clearly. I just saw this morning on Twitter just an incredible statement, and I had to take a screenshot of this, but it says, let's normalize not needing to know what people are going through in order to be kind and compassionate. I'll put that on the back of the shirt. Oh, that's so good. Let's normalize not needing to know what people are going through in order to be kind and compassionate. Is there any more that needs to be said? What is it behind our motivation to control? What is that? I know that beneath the surface, many times it's fear. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of being hurt. Control isn't really the source. It's simply a symptom of something deeper. It's always fear. But 1 John 4:18 says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. The implication of being perfected in love is that it will be an ongoing process throughout our entire life. Perfect love casts out fear. So let's normalize not needing to know what people have gone through in order to be kind and compassionate. Love that. And through the process of giving and receiving of love and the spirit of openness and the spirit of humility, we'll recognize that our own worst enemy is actually ourselves. This whole time, it's actually ourselves, not anyone else. And we will begin to see things as they really are, not just through our cloudy vision. Mark shared an important story that I wanted to share this morning from the perspective of a philosopher, Miroslav Volf. And the philosopher was giving a lecture on the importance of embracing our enemies, and he wrote a book about it, and Mark has, and I've read some of it. And at the end of the lecture, Wolf's mentor is named Jürgen Moltmann, very well-known, renowned philosopher, stood up and asked, "But can you love the Serbs?" Wolf was a Croatian. He had gone through his whole life and experienced a lifelong war against the Serbs. His response was something I'll never forget. He said, "I can't love, but I want to. I can't love, but I want to." I think there's so much raw openness and humility in that statement. I can't love, but I want to. When we think of people that frustrate us today, maybe certain groups of people, what if we had the courage to admit to ourselves, I can't love. Maybe today, I can't love, but I want to. Don't you think that's a powerful posture to live in? It's so honest. It's a powerful step. It may just be the first step, but it's a powerful step in saying, I want to see my enemies. I want to see the people that I disagree with God's eyes. So Christ, illuminate the world. Illuminate the world around us. Don't we need that today? And back to Mary Beth Ingram. When she talked about Imago Christi, she says, we are called to the greatness of God in the smallest things. Just breathe a breath of fresh air in the smallest things. We're called to the greatness of God in the smallest things. We see divinity within humanity. We discover in ourselves a light within, and we discover in every human being and everything that exists an inner light that is a gift from God, Imago Christi. Let me finish with this. And this is from Matthew 5:14. You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives by opening up to others. You'll prompt people to be open with God, this generous Father in heaven. We are called to Imago Christi. Let's all wear shirts. Let's clothe ourselves with that. Because whether we know it or not, we already are. Seeing others in the illuminated love for all people, whether on this side or that side. Let's pray. God, I know that you have called us to something beautiful, something humble, something open, but it's hard. And I can't do it, but I want to. So God, give us the humility. Pull us out of ourselves. Help us see the world with your eyes, as you are the world's light and you illuminate everything before us. Help us to see more clearly today. Help us to put this in our pocket. Help us to clothe every part of our being with it. Imago Christi. We are the images of Christ in the world today. Let us not play the blame game. Let us not play the game at all. We are Imago Christi. And I thank you for filling us up with that, even when we're not aware, when you do amazing things that we're not expecting. And God, I just ask that when we see people today, when we go out of this place, and maybe you need to remind us every day that we can normalize not needing to see people and their past. Not needing to know what others have gone through to be kind and compassionate. And this is no side mission. This is the mission. And I thank you for that, God. And I just pray today that you will just fill up our being with your love. That we can go out of this place refreshed and renewed. In the name of Christ. Amen.